So we'll call the November 4th meeting of the Jericho Planning Commission to order. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Chris, thank you for joining. Chris Shaheen, Town Planner, is joining from the New England Planners Conference type of thing in Maine. And Sabina, thank you very much for coming early and pinch hitting to run all the technology for us today. So tonight we will have some time for public comment, although as I said, I don't see any public online or in the room at the moment. We will look at the minutes of October 21st and then primarily spend our time on the next topic along this journey that we're on, investigating ways to improve our zoning beyond the village centers to enable housing development, especially housing for middle income Vermonters. And tonight's topic is about incentives and clustering, especially in rural areas. Then we'll hear some reports from everyone, discuss any other business, plan for the November 18th meeting, and then adjourn. Does anybody need to make any changes to the agenda? Okay. Any public comment? TikTok. I would say no, since there's no public here. Okay, so next I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of October 21st.
Motion to approve the minutes of October 21.
Wendy, thank you. And a second?
A second.
SJ, thank you. So the minutes are on the table for review. Does anybody have any edits, corrections, or clarifications for the minutes? Okay, no changes. All those in favor of approving the minutes, please say yes.
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 I abstain.
Chris is abstaining, and any no's? No. Okay. Now I will pass it over to Town Planner Chris Shaheen.
Great, thanks. Tonight we are continuing our discussion on enable housing and looking at what zoning can do in areas beyond village centers to make it easier to build housing. This is being coupled with looking at recent work by the Conservation Commission that looked at forest cover and how that might be incorporated into natural resource areas. You can go to the next slide. This is, again, just a recap of the charts that was given us to us by the select board. One of them was specific to looking at how we can incentivize smaller, denser housing options and more housing types. So that's the focus of what we're going to be talking about tonight. If you want to go to the next slide. We are moving through a number of topics methodically. Tonight, as Susan mentioned, we are looking at incentives, looking at our PUDs. I'll give an overview of what that process is and what incentives we've gotten there right now. At the last meeting, we focused on considering additional natural resource protection in areas that we are looking at to make it easier to build more housing. And based on that discussion, we are creating a working group that included myself, Susan, Sabina, and Tom Barabow from the Conservation Commission to look into this more, and we'll report back to the PC on this, on its recommendations once we do that. If you want to go to the next slide. In terms of goals that we have defined since we started our work, there are really no changes. So this is just a reminder of where we've been. And if you want to go on to the next slide. For guidance, in addition to what we've already covered at previous meetings, we have added looking at separating lot size from densities. So you can see that at the bottom of the page with underline. At our last meeting, we had a follow-up from our discussion on October 7th, and we decided to look more closely at how Heinsberg and Westford do this and to see how this could apply to Jericho, specifically to give us flexibility in allowing smaller lot sizes in some of our zoning districts, but maintaining the underlying density. If you want to go to the next slide. So that was actually a really quick summary. Usually we have a little more to recap from our previous meetings, but I think we did a really good job at our last meetings of kind of getting up to speed. So we're going to jump right ahead to our 10-minute takeaways. So tonight it's on two articles that are related to zoning. one about limits of zoning on addressing our desire to create housing that is more affordable, and the other about the benefits of including incentives in zoning that results in developers creating more public amenities in exchange for flexibility in how zoning is applied to a project. Zoning certainly does play a role in what we can do to encourage housing development, especially in locations planned for growth. And all thoughts on the two articles are welcome, but I want to make sure that we understand we need to temper our expectations of how much zoning can do on its own to support housing development that is aligned with our town plan and our goals. So with that, just kind of cue it up. I don't know who wants to start the discussion based on the two articles or what their takeaways were, with the focus being on, what our expectations for zoning to fix really complex issues that it can help address, but does not control.
I don't have anything really substantive to say. The two pieces felt like opinions from so far above the actual nuts and bolts that it felt a little, I don't know. I didn't learn a lot from it other than how these people felt about it, but I'm really interested in the harvesting incentives, whatever that was referenced, to actually see some examples of how zoning can incentivize, rather than just talking about the fact that zoning can or can't incentivize. So whether it's from that or some other place, some tangible real life examples of incentives, and some analysis of, how effective they've been in a community like ours, I think would be something I may Google later on because of reading these articles.
Yeah, I was curious about the harvesting benefits too. It seems like that's just a paid document. Right, but that felt like that's where the meat was in that article.
I didn't think to look at UVM to see if we could get it through the
Oh, yeah.
library.
Maybe, yeah.
And we wouldn't have to pay for it.
Yeah.
Although, I don't know, $10 is pretty steep.
I felt like some of the things in the other article, I named it boo zoning. I named my articles in my notes, yay zoning and boo zoning. But some of the things that they mentioned there were affirming that things that we are already doing. And so I was like, all right, well, we're on the right track, but agreed that, what is the fear of influence of zoning in a community to achieve its housing goals? And it is limited, which sent me down a rabbit hole of some of the developers that are working in Vermont, whose mission is to do infill and affordable housing. And there's just models out there. So how do we start conversations with those folks, and whose responsibility is it to start those conversations, and maybe start, and more than that, like build relationships with folks that have the skill sets.
And not just the skill sets, I think, but also the that reflect, I guess, the values of the
Yeah.
town plan.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
My takeaway was, yes, zoning is limited. But yes, we need to do everything we can with zoning to make sure we're doing everything we can with zoning. I think in terms of the minimum reform suggested in the, why zoning doesn't work article, we've done them all. So that made me feel good. I was interested in it was also interesting, I think, to be reminded of the history of zoning as exclusionary, and it made me feel better that I think we are actively and have actively moved in the other direction, to not use zoning that way. So I thought that was interesting. I was wondering if the article about incentive zoning or why zoning could work, if we wanted to think about inclusionary zoning, and I was also interested in the idea of grounding incentives in analysis of market conditions.
I like that too.
Sort of as a checkpoint on what the incentives are and how they may or may not be working. And then the idea that there's a relationship between the incentives and ideally public benefits, but are we actually getting public benefits from the incentives?
Yeah, it's the same questions. It's not like we're building a park every time somebody puts in a development or some other kind of perk like that. So.
I mean, it does tee us up for tonight's discussion about PUDs though, which
Yes.
does try to do that. Not necessarily a public access park, but
Eric, you want to chime in?
Yes, I also read both the articles, and really the one why zoning reform won't solve the housing crisis kind of hit a little more home for me than the others about the exclusionary nature of zoning. But the fundamental part was really on, I think, the fourth page where the idea came out that two things. One, zoning regulations are really not well used in areas where you can't, where you could, sorry, are poorly used, and you've got a lot of areas where zoning changes can't promote much or do, sorry, let me rephrase all of that and go back to the beginning. He talks about how in large cities, the great development potential is not used in most residential, commercial, and industrial areas. And there's not a lot of controversy to putting it there. So we've kind of moved into that direction right now, saying, let's think about the Riverside. It's kind of a residential commercial area, and there's no controversy about putting things there. But that's generally not where a lot of things end up happening in the end, as the author says there. The main change, project density, doesn't bring prices down, doesn't make it more affordable, doesn't do a lot of things that we say we want to have occur in the zoning that we're trying to put into play. So I took away from that sort of the different perspective, that it's more than just zoning that's going to make a difference. We have to do other things to make the town or the regions more attractive for people to have higher densities and to make it work. And one of the other pieces that the author in there does also cite is this whole idea that, and he's writing about Montreal, as you all recall, you have this great public good coming in where there's going to be a subway station outside of Montreal. If you've driven up to Montreal, you've seen it recently. And the opposition to that from the residential neighborhoods was almost enough to kill it. And I think we risk that in Riverside, where opposition to big development is going to get bigger and more severe as we go forward. So to me, it's less about the zoning and more about how we prepare the residents for what the zoning can bring in and get their buy-in even before the zoning changes, that this is something they want. So that was, I think, a really, to me, that was a big takeaway from this. Zoning's not going to do it if the people who live near there are going to fight it tooth and nail. And we've got to find a way through that.
I think I just want to add, I think that their point about density not necessarily being less expensive is nuanced, and they were referring specifically to expensive high-rise buildings, not bringing costs down. But they said also that medium rise or smaller projects, the higher density does bring costs down. And so I think density is absolutely a tool to bring construction costs down in our area.
I'm not sure, Chris, if the construction costs are going to be significantly lower for what we do in Riverside. And if you layer in supply and demand, people aren't going to be building low-cost construction in those areas. Or the residents they put in will be filled with all the bells and whistles because that's what the market will demand right now. So it's not
Well,
affordable housing.
the cost of construction is absolutely complicated and largely out of our control, but I also really believe that higher density can generally bring costs down. So I think, anyway.
We've talked about this before, that having it at the right scale for our community. Like one of the articles said that, there has to be market demand for density beyond what the zoning already supports for that to work. So like it's, for Jericho, it's not gonna be able to, well, not gonna be able to support, but to have like 120 unit, 4-story big apartment building, there's not that many developers who can take that financial risk. And that would lead to potentially a lot of controversy in the community, whereas like a 6-plex or a 12-unit apartment building, or in a lot of different parts of town, would be like perfectly marketable and affordable and harmonious.
And potentially have a lower cost of construction because there won't be as much of the infrastructure that has to be tied into or supported by the buildings. Again, Riverside, that infrastructure is going to be paid for not by an individual building, but by all the construction that goes in there. It may be a lot cheaper to do that 4-plex, that 6-plex in another part of town where all you have to do is put in a septic and you're done.
And it seems like the state of Vermont has come to the conclusion that one of the best catalysts, one of the best incentives is to provide better financing and better access to loans and subsidies and everything for infrastructure. They're sort of like, seems like they're putting their eggs in that basket. They think that will be the incentive that has the best chance of driving development. Because they've thrown hundreds of millions of dollars at it, and most recently, the chip yeah, right, a year. So that's like not an incentive in our zoning, but could potentially be like if we had infrastructure eventually in Riverside, our zoning could take advantage of that and make a lot more quick and easy, like you're connected to the public wastewater, then XYZ approvals can happen in this way. So I agreed with everything everybody said. Chris, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I mean, I think that was a really good discussion, and it's a lot of that was what I was hoping people would get out of it or take from it. I do want to see what I can find on the harvesting incentives article, and see if we can find that and see if we can pass that around so that people can read that too. But with that, I think we can move on and get into the real meat of the discussion for tonight, which is on zoning incentives to encourage housing. My presentation is going to cover our existing incentives that are included in our PUD objectives, what projects are required to go through PUD review, current requirements and incentives, and then a review of PUD outcomes, at least for PUD projects that have been reviewed by the DRB since 2020, so for the last 6 years. The goal for tonight, my goal for tonight, is to get some guidance on additional incentives that we might want to look at. And then if there are specific areas where we want to focus them on, like specific zoning districts we want to look at. You can move on to the next slide. So Jericho's zoning defines specific objectives for PUDs, and these actually mirror what is in state statute that defines what PUDs can do. Um, and by helping the town achieve these objectives, developers can use dimensional standards that allow for greater flexibility. That's the whole purpose of a PUD. The purposes cover a range of objectives that implement goals and policies that are in the town plan. One of the objectives is related specifically to affordable housing and providing a mix of housing. That specifically is, quote, encourage provision of affordable housing and or to encourage a mix of housing types, single household, townhouses, apartments, owned and rented, starter home, and senior, for residents with various income levels and at different life stages, especially where integrated into a site or project. If you want to go to the next slide. So PUDs are encouraged for our development, but they are required in specific circumstances. So regulations currently require them for any major subdivision. That's a subdivision with 4 lots or more, and when multiple buildings are proposed on a single lot. Projects in village centers, so that's Jericho Center, Jericho Corners, Riverside Village Center, and the Riverside Village neighborhood, are exempt from PUD requirements, which makes sense since recent updates to zoning do away with minimum lot size and density caps in those districts. And that's really the big incentive of going through PUD is you get smaller lot sizes and the potential for a density bonus. Chris Flynn raised some issues with the requirements that major subdivisions go through a PUD. So I'm looking into that and I'm going to follow up with the Planning Commission at a later time on that. I've started to look into it and I just don't have enough answers to report back. So for now, we are focusing on housing incentives in zoning that are currently included in our PUD regulations. If you can go to the next slide. So PUDs currently allow greater flexibility in dimensional standards that allow creative design and more efficient use of land. So shown on this slide are standard dimensions for each district next to reduced dimensions allowed through PUD. So you can see what the minimum lot size is for a standard subdivision versus a PUD, road frontage, front yard, et cetera, et cetera. You can see.
Where
Oh,
in the
go ahead.
regs are those? Where in the regs are those? They're not in 5.7. And I
For
just
the
find-
PUD,
Yeah,
they're right after it. I don't know if it's 5.8, but there's a table in 5.7, and then when you go to the next page, it's on that page.
okay. Thought that
You
was-
can, oh, go ahead. What's that?
No, keep going.
You can see that the minimum lot sizes, minimum frontages, and setbacks are significantly reduced. I thought this was interesting because the type of flexibility that Heinsberg and Westford allow for lot sizes in their base zoning are very similar or the same as to what we allow through our PUDs. Dimensional standards that do not change under a PUD is lot coverage, except for the village zone where it increases from 40% to 60%. But all of the other ones have, significant reductions in what the requirements are. If you want to go to the next slide. So most PUDs require a project to designate a certain amount of a parcel as open space, and that amount varies by district. The exception is the village center and the commercial districts. I'm sorry, the village district. The village center, which is exempt from PUDs, and then the commercial districts, which does not have an open space requirement. The amount of open space required to be set aside in the other zones increases as zoning districts become less dense. So it's 25% set aside for the village district and up to 50% in the rural ag and forestry district. You'll also see when I get into reviewing the PUD cases, that setting aside dedicated open space through PUD reviews is really the most common benefit Jericho gets from PUDs. And these are requirements as part of those PUDs. There are 8 specific resources identified in zoning to be protected by dedicated open space. Most are natural resources, but the list does include historic and cultural resources and trails or other pedestrian facilities. You can go to the next slide. Oh, yeah.
I have a question. Can you explain the relationship between lot coverage percentage and open space requirements. It's not clear to me, if you're doing a PUD, how, if the lot coverage requirement is for a specific lot, or if that's for the entire development, and if it is, how that relates to the open space that's required.
I believe it is for the specific lot. If you want to go back to the other slide, the previous slide. So for each of those, all of the dimensions within each column refer to that lot, specific lot. Does that make sense?
So when you're calculating the, not the lot coverage, but the open space requirement, you subtract the lots from the overall parcel. That gives you the open space requirement, and then within each lot, you then go to this table for the lot coverage. Is that correct?
Correct. I understand what you're saying. I think that'll be more clear when we get into the examples, but say you have a parcel that is 100 acres, and let's say it's in the rural ag district, 50% of that needs to be set aside. So 50 acres of the 100 needs to be set aside. Of that remaining 50 acres, you create your smaller lots, and then these requirements relate to those smaller lots. But these are just minimum requirements. It just allows you to go lower than what is allowed in the baseline.
Okay.
It doesn't require you to have like a half-acre lot in the rural ag. It just lets you go down to a half-acre.
Yeah.
Did that answer the question?
Yes. Yeah.
Great. Were there any other questions? We can go back to it later too, but great. Okay. So in terms of incentives for getting a density bonus for housing, there are 6 ways to get that bonus, including several related directly to the type of housing that we are trying to encourage in Jericho. A 50% bonus is possible when half of the units in a development are smaller than 1,300 square feet. And a 100% density bonus is possible when 20% of the units are designated as affordable housing, which is specified as units reserved for households earning no more than 80% of the area median income. In Chittenden County, that is 83,100 as an annual income for 2 people, or designated as senior housing, which is defined in zoning as housing for a person that's over 50 years old. There is another incentive to get a density bonus that's related to housing, albeit not related to affordability or unit size. That's when a mixed-use project in the commercial district includes residential units that are at least 50% of the floor area of that project. So this is my overview of what our zoning has for PUDs related to incentives. Are there any questions about this?
The only thing I was surprised about was that kind of at the end of this section, it suggests that like these are at the discretion of the DRB, that none of this necessarily means that you're guaranteed a density bonus if you meet these things, which surprised me.
Yeah, that is how I read it. Specific questions about how it's interpreted and used by the DRB, I would defer to Chris Flynn on that. If there
There's
aren't any other, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
It's sort of like a 2-step process, where you can be eligible for up to X density bonus, but then you're right, the DRB, so that would be the maximum density bonus that they can award. But based on the site conditions or, I forget, there's like other factors for them to consider where some particular project might not qualify for the full potential amount. And that's the way it was before. And when we worked on PUD in 2022, we just made that like a little bit more explicit between the language, like you're eligible and then they decide.
Yeah.
I forget the details about why it would be though, but I thought it was like site conditions, like steep slopes and access and stuff like that. So it's specifically not guaranteed.
But those things, the site conditions would be covered by the NRO separately. So I
Not
wonder,
necessarily, it could be like, it might be land not suitable, but still not resources that are covered by the NRO.
but I wonder if the fact that it's not guaranteed would deter developers from even asking.
That's kind of my point.
So is it prohibitive by the fact that it's not guaranteed?
My understanding is that the DRB has encouraged applicants to take greater density and they just don't take it.
And I think at a certain point, that's because of Act 250, right?
That's what the numbers would suggest.
So I hope that someone at the state level is thinking hard about that.
Well, that's why they made
But-
here,
But this is what Act 181 is about, right? This is
Right.
1B and tier.
I know, but Tier 1B that's good, that's great eventually for Riverside. It's not gonna do anything for the rest of, so the
Which
new
doesn't matter,
development
'cause
on Morgan
Riverside has a
Road,
density cap anyway.
the new development on Morgan Road that could have been more than 9 units, they capped at 9 because of Act 250. So that was straight up directly because of Act 250.
I hear you. I mean, we went to the Act 250 update talk and from their perspective, they were sort of like, look, I'm gonna just make this number, but like 90% of the
98%,
You
that was
know,
the number.
right, go through with minimal delays, minimal cost, and that it's only this 2% that gets this outsized attention. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying that's what we heard as a rebuttal to that sort of common
Well,
thought.
That Act 250 has been perceived as a real boogeyman and it is a disincentive, but that the facts on the ground don't really bear that out.
well, it's cost Greg Tatro costing him real money right now. I mean, one of his delays right now is trying to get through or around Act 250.
He might have been better off just going for Act 250. His project, well, probably, I'm not an Act 250 expert, but it seems like since 98% of the projects are approved without delay, and
But not but with extra cost.
the cost comes from appeals and legal representation and time's money to a developer. But they also gave statistics about how quickly they approve projects. And, our DRB approves within 45 days, and I think their timing was like 60 days.
Okay, then I guess what my point would be, my comment would be that may be technically true, but in reality, we have seen it repeatedly impact development in Jericho. And so whether the developers were correct in their assumptions about the Act 250 process or not doesn't matter, because they didn't go further because of Act 250.
But what would maybe help them more would be if the town educate, a lot of our developers are small, or they're a farmer, or they're, an individual property owner who's like, ooh, Act 250, I don't want to do it. And maybe if the town had educational resources, had a list of attorneys and land use experts.
Offered to
and
pay the fees.
reduced the impact fees for a project that would take advantage of a density bonus, but to to me, you know, I kind of agree with Sabina. It's like it's fixing the symptom. It's not curing the problem. Because I'm trying to think of like a good, a good analogy of like, you don't wanna, I bet I can't think right off the top of my head. But our takeaway from the Act 250 review was that the state felt like they needed to do more to encourage people to go through the Act 250 process because because they were confident that good projects that were well located, that were well designed, would get approved quickly and without controversy. And the reason they thought that is because that was their track record, but they agree that Act 250 is creating an artificial barrier. So not only did they, part of that 1B, but that's part of like taking it away from like a court proceeding and now it's going to be a board proceeding, or I don't really, actually don't quote me on that because I don't remember exactly the details, but they were making other improvements so that Act 250 would be less of a hurdle because the intention is not to stop development. Like the NRO, I've said this before, the intention is to create a peaceful coexistence design.
Right, but the reality, rightly or wrongly, the reality is different. And so maybe what Jericho can do is to try to be more proactive with developers when they bring a project to the town to say, listen, don't stop at 9.
Yeah,
This is how,
exactly.
this is how,
Agree.
but Jericho hasn't done that. So I'm saying that you may be right, but the reality, whether people are perceiving it correctly or not, they're still perceiving it that way. And so,
100%.
Right.
so what can we do? And so maybe the town can find some way to avoid that.
And now I think we haven't done it in the past because the reforms were not in place until just recently, right? So now is the time for us to embrace that idea and do that work because the reforms are enabling us to rethink how we.
Because the reforms aren't going to address Morgan Road projects. So the question is, how can the town, outside of Riverside, how can the town address this challenge?
And you say Morgan Road just because it's retroactive, because it's already built?
Because it's already built and because they said we are not doing more than 9 because we won't do Act 250. They could have. They probably wanted to.
When and who does that intervention take place? Is that a zoning administrator function? Is that a DRB function?
Intervention to like encourage
Yeah.
developers?
Yeah.
Well, I guess Chris did find that in some of the reviews, because you looked at the minutes and stuff, the DRB did say to the applicant, forgetting about Act 250, but they did say, you could potentially have more density on this project. So the DRB is one entity. It seems like general education about Act 250, some communication to landowners that, hey, did you know Act 250 has changed and it's been streamlined? And did you know that 98% of the things were approved? Like, I didn't know that. And I was like,
Maybe the town should aggressively publicize the willingness to help people through the process, whatever that form that takes.
Right.
But Front Porch Forum, on the website, whatever, say, don't let Act 250 limit your development. We will help you. Here's 5 ways we will help you. Please,
right,
don't stop at 9.
right,
That could be the campaign. Don't stop at 9.
Right, because
right.
I think, but it has to be a real, if we wait until they get to the DRB, you've already spent all the money on all the
Right.
design,
Oh,
all the
yeah.
engineering, it's
Right.
too late.
Yeah.
So it needs to be proactive now,
Mhm.
in some way.
I mean, maybe we can start to communicate that as once this zoning package is completed and we're rolling it out and we're like, hey, like, we haven't done that yet on the village center. It's like, hey, the zoning has changed. It's a lot more flexible. You can do a lot more with your property. And hey, we're still looking at wastewater. And hey, now we've changed things for the rural areas. And here's some Act 250 resources we could do that as like a public service, as part of our getting the word out that the zoning is becoming more flexible.
Do we know what the average expense of going through the Act 250 process is?
Remember that
Not specifically.
statistic, yeah,
I think it's probably project dependent, right?
yeah.
It probably is, but maybe that could
Well,
be,
we could try to find those.
Yeah, we can
numbers.
definitely
the
find
town
out.
could just incentivize that and say, whatever it costs you, we will deduct that from your fee.
Right,
In
Right.
some way, it will cost you nothing.
yeah.
And if you need legal help, whatever, we can help you. I mean, somehow. That's seems to me one of the more powerful things the town could do.
Mhm.
Because we're chock full of these, I suspect, people who are gonna stop at 9.
Yeah, I think when we look at the list with Chris, that's
Right.
what we'll see.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, there are 9, yeah.
There are lots of them are nines.
Right,
Okay,
right.
back to you, Chris.
Well, and I was just going to say on that first slide with the charts from the select board, one of the items is to look at fees and how that can be used to incentivize development. And that is one that the select board has kept for itself to take a look at.
Right, so we maybe could deliver them some advice about that or some more information about that.
You want to move on to the next slide? All right. Okay, so now I'm going to get into a review of PUDs that have been approved by the DRB between 2020 and 2025. I think this review gives us a good idea of the size and scale of PUDs, where they are happening, why they were required to go through the PUD process, and then we'll get into the objectives that they were achieving. Their PUDs, they're located throughout Jericho. Most of them are located in the northern half of town. I'm not sure why that is, other than that's probably where, well, I don't know, I have to look at zoning, but I'm not sure why that is the case. Almost half of them are in the low density residential zone. Another half is in the rural ag residential zone. One of them was in the forestry zone. The size of the parcels that have gone through this process ranged considerably. There was one that was 18.75 acres and then one that was over 160 acres. All included 9 units of housing or less. Only one took advantage of the housing bonus, and that increased units in the project from 6 to 8. So it was still under that threshold. Just over half of the PUDs were required because they were a major subdivision, although we don't know how many of those would have opted for a PUD just to take advantage of the flexibility and smaller lot size. 3 had less than 4 units, but they opted to go through the process to take advantage of the smaller lots. There was only one that went through the process that had multiple buildings on a lot. You want to go to the next slide? So I've pulled out 4 PUD examples just to kind of walk through in more detail. The first one is at 316 Vermont 15, which is located just south of Mills River Park. This is the PUD that was in the forest zone, and it is one with one of the larger acreages. 50% of the site was set aside as designated open space. That's the amount that's required for this zone. It did ask for and received relief from the requirement to provide a 100-foot buffer around the perimeter of the parcel, and it sought relief from the select board for the width of the roadway. It included 9 housing units on lots that ranged in size from 1.5 acres to 5 acres. This is a zone that had 10-acre minimum lot sizes, so that's a significant reduction. Notable features of the development included the protection of natural resources, including habitat blocks in the upper, well, actually, that's not included. I'm not going to say that. Steep slopes, wetland natural communities, and upland natural communities. It also included clustered development with smaller lots that allowed for consolidated infrastructure, and then dedication of a much larger contiguous open space. If you want to go to the next one. This example is at 163 Plains Road. It was a 26-acre PUD in the low-density residential zone. It set aside 13 acres of public space. Again, that's the 50% of the site that was required for a project in this zone. This is the one project that took advantage of the bonus density. It was allowed 6 units by right and then used the bonus density to get that up to 8. Lot sizes were also smaller than the minimum 3-acre for this zone, with lots ranging in size from 0.73 to 2.34 acres. The benefits included protecting working lands. That 13-acre set aside included a tree farm, which is consistent with PUD guidelines that open space can include agricultural lands. It was also one of 2 projects that specifically called out including energy efficiency as part of the project, going above and beyond what the basic standards were. And then, as I mentioned, it included 2 additional housing units. If you want to go to the next slide. The third project is at 177 Browns Trace. This was on a 38-acre parcel. It's also in the low-density residential zone. It included 9 units of housing clustered on 1 lot, with individual units centered on 0.6 acres that were designated for each unit. It's unusual in its use of 1 lot for 9 units. It's a different model of land ownership that may have had some benefits for making units more affordable. I'm not sure about that, and I'm not sure how to make that determination. Benefits associated with the PUD included 33 acres set aside for open space. That is significantly more than the 50% that was required for this zone. That open space protected areas with significant topography, habitat blocks, wetland natural communities, and upland natural communities. Its location also allowed it to tap into an existing municipal water system. I think this project is the best example of cluster development with the greatest number of units, the smallest lot sizes, and efficient infrastructure. It also included a shared septic system. If you want to go to the
Wait,
next
Chris,
slide. Oh,
so
yes.
there you say the lot size is 0.6 acres. Is that right?
I'm saying lot size, but it's really the dedicated area to each housing
Okay.
unit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was gonna say 9 units on 0.6. Okay, so it's really the difference between 38 and 33. So
Right, it was
5
1 lot. So it was a 5-acre lot subdivided between
5-acre
8.
lot utilized for 9 units. Okay, thank you.
Yep. Yeah, this is the one that had the multiple units on 1 lot.
And I think this would be a good example of how, if we were gonna improve on it, and we looked back to some of those other cluster development examples where we had like the 4 in a row, like this blob of houses, if it were a little bit in down the road a little bit, right, then it would have allowed for, if you look at this on Google Maps, you can see it has that telltale, like, Medusa in the woods effect. So I guess I'm just saying it could be better, even though it's good.
Interesting.
If the access road were shorter.
Yeah, right. If the houses were more concentrated towards Morgan Road.
And if
Yeah, I think I agree that I think the access road could have been shorter. I think more tree cover probably could have been protected. But I think it is, of the ones that have been
I hear you.
approved
I'm not trying to
recently,
pick
it's
it apart
still,
and
yeah.
destroy it. I'm just saying, we're coming at this from an educational thing, and so
Yeah.
from the conservation perspective, I would just say, it's good, but it could be even better.
Here's something else that's interesting about this one, because they did the consolidated, they did the 1 lot with the multiple structures on it. So what triggers Act 250 is 10 units or 10 lots, right? I think it's 10 lots. So if 1 lot needs to be dedicated for open space, so that's going to cap you at 9. If you want to avoid Act 250, that's going to cap you at 9 lots. So if you take your open space slot and you dedicate that as one, then you only have 8 lots for development. What this one did was, because it had multiple units on one lot, it's essentially 2 lots, which allowed them to do 9 units without triggering Act 250. Did that make sense, how I just explained it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but then what about all the other ones on the previous list that were all 9? That had, some of them had a dedicated open space lot and some of them don't. So our PUD doesn't require the open space to be its own lot currently.
Correct.
So in the other one, the first one that you showed, all that open space belongs to one buildable lot. It's just that the buildable.
Does it though? I mean, this was the weird one where they included the open space in every single one of those lots. Remember they divided it up?
Right, but the bulk of the open space is in that one lot. That can have a house on it.
Yeah.
It's just that the building envelope of the house is defined so that that they meet the open space acreage
What do you
requirement.
mean they included the open
So you
space in
see-
each lot?
Well, yeah, that's a good reaction. It's weird. So every lot, right? So everywhere there's a red box,
Yeah.
their lot has open space, required open space, that the green, that's,
Oh, so how does that, so that
Well-
takes me back to my question about lot size versus lot, open
Yeah.
space versus lot coverage. How would that be governed in this case? So you can double dip with the
I don't know, I mean.
lot coverage and the
this
open
was a-
space.
I think you would probably have to meet both requirements. You would have to meet the requirement that all the acres cumulative equal at least 50%. All the acres cumulative that are designated open space has to be add up to at least 50%. And
So you-
on each lot needs to not have more than 30% pervious.
You think in
surface.
those deeds, like if you bought one of those little red houses, it would be specified in your deed, that you could not
I think
put a
we,
structure outside
I
of
think we
that.
looked at the plat,
area.
the plat has a building envelope. In this particular case, that green is like this.
It's the,
It's-
it's that hill,
it's
it's that hill that you see.
Completely unbuildable steep slope, so the open space incorporated steep slopes. So instead of somebody, zigzagging a driveway up this steep slope and having erosion issues and taking down trees between the development and Route 15, the topography lended itself that strip, not even a strip, but that
Mhm.
sort of
Hillside.
winding hillside to the northwest of the development is all considered open space because it's basically undevelopable anyway.
To your point, Chris, I think my reading of the regs was that, yes, that is in the deed, that is open space from here on out in perpetuity written down in your deed passed on.
Could they log it?
You can log open space.
Well, I think
Is that
I
considered
think they
working?
had specific criteria about keeping that hillside wooded, so that it would, anyway, we're probably getting way too
Yeah,
deep in the
we're getting
weeds
in the weeds.
for this conversation, but anyway. I'll move the slides forward again, Chris.
And the same thing
Okay,
is,
so, I mean, I also want to say, like, I'm not the zoning administrator, and if we really want to drill down and understand sort of the lot coverage questions, I mean, I can follow up with Chris Flynn and get specific answers to them. Do you see how, is that a question in terms of how they relate to housing, or is it just a general question and just wanting to better understand how the PUD open space requirement works?
Well, my question was more, is it clear in the zoning how to use both of those terms as you're applying for a project? Is it clearly written? And I don't, I don't remember. I don't know. That's my fundamental question.
Yeah, understood. I'll follow up on that. Let me just write that down. Okay. All right. So the last example here is a PUD. It was on a 30.8 acre parcel at 89 Raceway Road. It's in the rural ag residential zone. It included 2 lots. This is one of the projects that applied for a PUD to take advantage of the smaller lot sizes. The 2 lots with the residential units are 5.86 and 6.11 acres. That's less than the 10-acre minimum for the zone. The 18.8 acre lot is set aside for open space. It's not really clear. It's on the left. It's basically the left half of the parcel, just above the scale. In the middle of the map, you can see where it says graphic scale. On the left side of that, there's sort of a line that goes up and down across the site. That's the line between the 2 lots in the front, and then the conserved area in the back. That 18.8 acre lot set aside for open space more than the 50% that was required for this zone. And it included forested riparian areas, habitat blocks, and upland natural communities. Do you want to go to the next slide?
Can I just
Oh,
ask a
go
quick
ahead.
question?
Yep.
So did they do the PUD specifically for the natural resource protection? Because they could have easily gotten 2 10-acre lots on there. I don't, why did they, do you know more specifically why they did the PUD?
I asked and I was told that they did it specifically because they wanted smaller lots, and I don't know why. I think that the site has a lot of topography on it. All I was told was
Okay.
specifically that it was for the smaller lots.
I think that's right.
It's a good question, and I don't know the answer.
Okay.
That is a.
Just looking at the contour lines, if I'm seeing them correctly, it gets pretty steep on that left-hand jog of the property. So that probably had a lot to do with it too.
It's good snowshoeing back there.
Yeah, I don't know if there are tax implications for having smaller lots. Yeah, I just don't know the answer. Do you want to go to the next slide? In terms of assessing the effectiveness of achieving the purposes for PUDs that are defined in the regulations, it's a mixed bag, and I did the best I could with the information I had to come up with this assessment. So there may be lots of questions about this, but I can explain, how I kind of came up with these criteria. I would say that the PUDs are most effective in protecting natural resources and avoiding fragmentation of the resources. 5 of the purposes are being partially met, with them being addressed in 3 or more projects. So if it was 3 or more, I classify them as being partial. I'm including housing on this list because 1 project took advantage of a density bonus and included 2 more units than would have been allowed by right, and 2 were PUDs for the purpose of creating smaller lots, which would lead to a reduced cost in purchase. But none of them included affordable housing, small units, or senior housing. But just so you know, that is how I came up with my assessment on that. I'm also including rural compatibility. There are no objective standards to measure this, but all of the projects with more than 2 units took advantage of smaller lot size to cluster homes that mitigated their overall impact on the site and visibility. In terms of efficient use of public facilities, 2 of the projects took advantage of municipal water. 1 included a shared wastewater system. And I think in general, clustered projects allow for more efficient use of roads. So I also thought that I gave that one a partial. two projects specifically cited using Vermont's residential building energy stretch code, and another specifically called for that it allowed solar panels, which show that I think there's some success in promoting energy efficient development. And I already mentioned previously, clustering of homes, particularly those in larger subdivisions, I think was fairly successful. Areas that were lacking are ones that included compact and pedestrian-oriented development. But to be fair, that's something that we want to encourage in in our village centers and commercial district and village zones. Two of them are exempt from PUDs, and there were no PUDs in the third, which was the village district. So, and then along those same lines, promoting more efficient transportation and multimodal connections had limited opportunities since most projects were in less dense areas, although one project did include a sidewalk easement, and I think that was in one of the ones in the low density residential. Are there any questions about my assessment?
This is really valuable work, Chris. Thank you for doing this.
Thanks.
And it's interesting to think about, like, but for what, you know, what of these objectives were only done because of the PUD? Like, what there's no way to know the answer to this necessarily, but I don't know. I don't know how to complete that thought. I
think it's a good question, and I don't know how we would get the answer to that.
Yeah, I don't think it's answerable, but I think what I'm getting at is this feels like a lot of objectives to all kind of loop together, where your approach might want to be different depending on which objective you're trying to push. So part of this was I got a little curious about Shelburne. And they've got 4 different PUD regs depending on their objective. A separate one for conservation, a separate one for what they call pocket neighborhoods, which are small dwellings, another one for, I think they call it traditional neighborhood development, and then something they call campus, which wouldn't apply to us. But it seemed like an approach where you might have different places to be flexible and different things you want to incentivize for a conservation PUD. Whereas something where you're really trying to promote small housing, you might want to use different regs, and trying to lump them all together under this one
Size
reg
fits
to
all
rule
is
them
not-
all seems messy, ambiguous, and maybe not as effective, particularly when we're talking about incentivizing, which is where my question that we can't possibly answer is coming from. So let's say about that.
So, you're right, that each district has different goals. And so the chart that showed the PUD dimensional standards is different for that reason, like frontage and how big the lot can be and stuff like that. And then the open space requirement is on a spectrum to try to accomplish that kind of thing. And then the stuff around connectivity and pedestrian in the more rural areas, the text set encourages contiguous open space and trails, whereas in village, it talks more about connections to sidewalks and connecting neighborhoods together. So it tries to recognize that there can be different goals, and it tries to say, like, it tries to be flexible, but maybe that's diluting it and it's too hard for the average landowner to be like, what's this PUD thing? Like, I don't see where I fit in.
It's too hard, like, people are clearly taking advantage of it and using it, but I think that what you just described is a way to honor the goals of each district. And what I'm talking about is specific ways to incentivize one of these objectives. And so if my objective is small compact housing, I might want to have a lot more flexibility with the building dimensions than what's allowed here, so that the density, give me my maximum density and let me see if I can make something fit if I'm going to build really small and compact. Or, you know, whatever, like there's ways that
The more targeted.
if we're talking about incentivize, like using PUDs as a way to incentivize the particular kind of housing that we want, then I think that we, yes, obviously need to honor the goal of the district. But I think that what Chris is saying here is that our real objectives that our PUDs are serving is conservation, is open spaces, protecting natural resources, and some of these other things. Yeah, like I don't know if that energy efficiency, if they would have done that anyway. Like I doubt, well, maybe, I don't know. We have no way of knowing. But the PUD regs aren't written, the benefit, the incentive isn't tied to the objective.
Right. The
The only thing that the benefits and the incentives are tied to is open space and conservation. Well, the only benefit that the town is really getting is open space and conservation. And the incentives kind of seem like afterthoughts, like, all right, well, yeah, we'll give them smaller lots if they want to do this, or we'll give them smaller lots if they want to do this, instead of saying, we want more small, compact housing. So what are the things that we can be more flexible on in order to assure that?
My
and use
question
PUD.
relates to that. I think your question, SJ. My question is, we don't have any way to, I keep thinking about affordability, and we don't have any way to know whether the PUD, the projects that have used PUDs, whether the PUD has helped with the affordability of the project. And so it's one of those questions that we don't ask. But it would be interesting to ask the developer, the fact that you've done this PUD and you're doing 9 units, what impact does that have on the cost of each one of those units?
The cost or the price.
Price, right? Because part of me is wondering, I think there's still, because the supply and demand in Jericho, the supply is so low that I think that there are plenty of cases where the cost that someone is paying to buy a house reflects more the fact that there's no supply than it does the actual cost to build a house. So I wonder, I'm curious about, it'd be nice to ask these developers, by the way, what impact do you see on the cost of your development because you can do 9 units here instead of 6?
No, I don't have the facts to back this up, but this is what I think the one article that we read is getting at, is that I don't think zoning is the way to address housing cost. I don't think we can provide enough of a density bonus to incentivize smaller houses and lower cost houses. Milton has a zoning allowance for clustered cottage courts that there was some interest in. People weren't doing it. I think it had 100% density bonus. It increased it to a 300% density bonus, and people have still not taken advantage of it.
But I feel like maybe it's just me, but I feel like one of the main reasons we're trying to encourage smaller houses is that they will be less expensive. And so, so I guess I'm a little surprised to hear you say that you don't think that incentivizing building smaller would affect the price, because I think that's one of the main reasons we want to encourage that.
No, I definitely think it would. I don't think it's not going to happen in this market. It doesn't mean that it's not going to happen in a future market. And I think I said this before. What developers have told me is that the big expenses in the kitchen and bathrooms, and they need to have the bigger houses to offset the cost of those. And when you have the smaller houses, it's just not offsetting the cost enough for them to make a profit.
So
I think that kind of opens the door for another question around that of, how much additional volume per or units per development would be necessary to drive the cost down. So if going from 9 to 12 or 9 to 15 would allow them to have greater economies of scale, where is that break point? Because what you're saying is right now they're telling us it's the cost of the kitchens and the bathrooms that's killing something. Kitchens, they cost a lot. It's the time to push the plumbing in there and the electrics and blah, blah, blah. All right. If you do that one at a time, onesie twosies, it's pretty expensive. Where does the economies of scale come into play with more units? And where is that number? That would be the question to answer.
So I think someone else on the commission is going to know these numbers better than myself. I can't pull them out of my mind off the top of my head. But that project down on Shelburne Road, did it have like 58 units in it?
It's
And
90.
90
There's
some?
some rental and some purchase, and I think the total was 96.
And
Somewhere.
how many millions of dollars of subsidies went into that project?
Oh, it cost, I think each unit was like $700,000. Like that was
It was,
the actual.
yeah, I think thought I remembered like upper six hundreds, but it could have been around seven. And I think they sold them in the 300s and 400s. And that was with municipal water, with municipal sewer, and again, millions of subsidies.
Yeah, 94 permanently affordable homes, including 68 apartments for rent and 26 condominiums for sale, all developed by Champlain Housing Trust.
So this is, first of all, not the scale that we're talking about. And secondly, the subsidy point is a good one. The Montpelier is trying to invest in this kind of housing, this small, potentially multi-unit, compact housing. That's what they're trying to insert money in to get built. We need to make sure that we've got regs that allow for that to happen and incentivize that to happen, period. And there are mission-driven builders, and or again, we just sat through talks about this, about how the state is trying to invest funds to make this kind of housing happen, even in rural areas like ours. That's why the CHIP is a thing. So I understand the frustration, but it shouldn't stop us from trying to do what we've said our goals are this whole time, which is increase the diversity of housing, incentivize or facilitate small and compact housing. so that whether it's perpetually affordable, whether it's whatever, because it's smaller, because it's on a smaller lot, it is more affordable than the 6,000 square foot single family home on 10 acres.
And I remain deeply convinced that if you built a little cottage court development of 1,000 square foot, 1,200 square foot houses, they would be wildly popular.
That's the thing that's kind of funny about market demand. It's like, well, there's a different anything. You could sell just about anything right now. So anyway.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yeah.
This is a fundamental for this conversation,
Yeah.
but I think I missed. Actually, when you were talking about the Sheldon Road, was a PUD objective tied to a zoning district?
No, that's my point. Yeah.
Okay, so it was
no.
all open.
Well-
Every objective was available to everything.
With some exceptions, like the campus you couldn't do and whatever. And you had to meet the specific, goals and some of the specific standards of the district. And so like campus wasn't allowed in the rural district and whatnot. The one thing I want to pull out about our PUD affordability things is I would be very surprised if any of our developers would touch a perpetually affordable number of units, because it requires some kind of oversight to ensure that continues to be perpetually affordable. And that is a whole nother world and a whole nother that I think we absolutely don't want to regulate against. But I think that doesn't check. And I would be surprised if anyone ever takes advantage of that for a density bonus. And specifically because, with a couple of exceptions, because of what you're saying, where you're not going to get a build that can be perpetually affordable on the scale that we're doing, with the exception of Habitat for Humanity or some kind of one-off. But Champlain Housing Trust, Cathedral Square, they are not interested in doing smaller builds right now. And so tying it to perpetually affordable, or specifically tying it to that 80% AMI, I think we really need to look at in terms of incentivizing affordable.
So
I could see someone taking advantage of the 55 and older community before and the other one, because there are models that do that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an interesting point, though, whether or not we have different kinds of PUDs, to look at doing a better job of matching up an incentive to an objective. Because right now, our only carrots, we have two carrots. Carrot number one is smaller lots with other dimensional variation, and carrot number two is a density bonus. So that, I think the harvest incentives, like what other than reduce, we know about reducing fees. We've already done streamlined permitting and zoning administrator and review and parking and all those other things. Like, what other carrots are in the vegetable bin that we could potentially use that make a better fit? My one tweak, though, on what SJ said earlier about public benefit, I see every row in the PUD objectives as some form of public benefit, not just affordability or not just, so I don't agree that the PUDs have only been successful at the natural conservation. I think the way he's lined it up, the PUDs have okay, maybe energy efficiency, sure, they would have done that anyway. But because of the nature of smaller lots, we have, and just the examples we just looked at, they are clustered. And that is a public benefit because less land is consumed and it's a more efficient design, and efficient use of public facilities is good for the public. And if we got any of those transportation things, those would be public benefit. Rural compatibility is probably the most like loosey-goosey one. But I think we're not getting enough of those public benefits potentially because density or smaller lot sizes are not compelling enough or the catalyst to get that public benefit.
Let me try to bring some focus. I love this discussion. I think this is a great discussion. We are charged now with looking at housing, and I really liked what SJ said about, the idea of tailoring benefits to the type of purposes we want to achieve, and maybe I took it a step further in saying in different places. So I don't think if we want to do something by December and January, looking at all of the PUD benefits and doing something more comprehensive. But if we really want to focus on a housing density bonus and sort of drilling down on that, are there, like, where would we want to focus that?
Well, I had a thought on that. Right, two thoughts. One is, do we want to give a bonus for a PUD that builds in extra initial septic capacity? And do we want to build in or incentivize an HOA that has open guidelines for future ADUs and development, which seems to be an issue in most of the current HOAs.
Those are good ideas.
I don't know if we have talked about this before. I think we have, about focusing more on the village and low density residential areas for density bonuses as opposed to the rural ag and forestry. I don't know if that's something we want to talk about.
I
So
was really surprised that low density residential. Well, I guess I shouldn't be surprised. The open space requirement. I don't have a fully. Go ahead. They're fragments bouncing around. Sorry, I can't catch them and put them in order.
The open space requirement for of 50%.
Of 50% in the LDR.
Yeah.
The
That
open
seems really
space,
high.
it seems really high. The open space requirement. I mean, can we talk about a PUD that doesn't have an open space requirement, or an open space requirement that isn't contiguous? Will I get chased out of town with pitchforks?
No, a lot of them are not contiguous, unfortunately. They don't have to be contiguous. It's just nice if they are.
Well, and maybe
It's-
that's where we make that distinction, where in the
Right.
outer zone, in
So-
the outlying areas where we already have that to start with, keeping it, and in the growth areas in the low density residential, we can tweak it. And
That's one of the things
Yeah.
that Shelburne changes a little bit depending on whether that it doesn't,
whether or not it's contiguous, and then for like their pocket neighborhoods, it's not a percentage of the parcel, it's a green space of 10,000 square feet or 400 square feet per lot or something like that. Like they do kind of. Because it's serving different purposes.
Scales a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, no.
That's weird.
Chris, could you pose your question again? I'm sorry.
We
like-
can't hear you. Wait, but it looks like you're talking, but I don't hear you. But you don't seem to be muted.
No.
You're not muted, but we can't hear you.
It's like a problem he's familiar with.
Eric, can you unmute and we'll see if we hear you?
My lips are moving. Can you hear what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yes.
We can hear you. We can see your lips and hear your voice.
Can you
Yeah.
hear me now?
Yeah. Bad.
Okay.
Maybe the bandwidth in your hotel is crappy.
Yeah, I was getting notices that can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, okay. So I wanted to clarify what I was saying before about focusing on some areas with enhanced density bonuses. That would still maintain what we have for other areas, but there might be other areas where we want to bump it up more. So it wouldn't be doing away with a density bonus in the rural ag and forestry, but leaving what we have for that. And focusing on the LDR and village and seeing if there's something more we can do in those areas.
I need to think about that. I don't know how I feel about that yet.
Yeah, I'm just putting it out there.
And then what did you think about our discussion here that potentially the open space requirement in the low density residential district at, I think the current one was 50%, maybe seems high? Or is it higher than it needs to be? If you already have to protect resources that are in the natural resources overlay, so that's a different tool to accomplish a similar goal. And so SJ was talking about how Shelburne does it. Would you think we should think about that?
I think that's worth looking at. Because I think the rural ag and forestry are the most important to have the most set aside. But the other ones I think are worth looking at. Although I just had a thought. Let me see if I can bring it back what it was. Oh, I think we would want to tie it to additional housing because I wouldn't want to lower our open space requirements and still get 8 to 9 units.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Gotcha.
I also forgot that the commercial district doesn't have an open space requirement.
That was one of the things I said when you couldn't read my lips. Sorry.
Yeah, okay, so I wouldn't be
Yeah.
kicked out of town.
And then Chris had a couple of ideas of additional incentives. Did that spark any other ideas from anybody else? Of like a new idea of a new thing to potentially incentivize that has like a corollary benefit? It's not necessarily an additional house right this minute per se, but.
It was so
I
neat to
wonder
see
if you're looking at some of our more rural districts, if we were to incentivize denser developments in large lots, concentrated, so think of a Tyler Place type thing where you've got, was it 10 or 12 units there on 55 acres that's conserved.
21 units.
21 units. Okay. So if you have a higher density in that one area, but at the same time preserve a larger parcel of land, that to me might be a way to meet the two, not necessarily conflicting, but related goals of preserving open space while having more affordable housing. So if we can have a higher density on a smaller lot, or a smaller parcel within a larger parcel that's conserved, that might be something we want to try incentivizing.
Wendy, can you pull up that thing that I sent you, that Google Doc? At the very, very end, there was an incentive in, I forget what town, but about tiny house, like a tiny house incentive.
Was this the one that had the lists of resources around the forest preservation of open space?
Yeah, our definitions.
Oh, the
document.
definitions one.
Yeah, at the very bottom, I just
Okay.
threw in something that caught my eye and I put it in the bottom, like, remember for the future category.
Now is the future. The future
And
is
I just-
now.
I'm just wondering if that will trigger some other ideas for us. It's,
I'm trying to think about what one of our earlier conversations that I
Tiny house bonus, that one.
yes.
Would you like me to read it?
Sure, I guess. I opened a can of worms.
So this is detached tiny dwelling units with a footprint less than 500 square feet. Such as, and they give you a bunch of different categories. Any parcel, regardless of size, may have as many as 2 additional detached tiny dwelling units allowed. Either the tiny dwelling unit. This is, I don't know how helpful this is.
Okay, all right.
But the idea is they define how big a tiny dwelling unit should be and how many can be on a parcel.
I don't, I'm just thinking off the top of my head here. I think our regulations already do a really good job of allowing ADUs and smaller houses and things like that on people's properties. And that a way to get at that is with public education and really making sure people know what they can do and promoting that type of housing type through that. Through that
I'm
mechanism.
sorry. I didn't remember the specifics of it, and I wasn't sure if it was a little more pertinent to what we're talking about, but I guess not. So.
No, then there's also Vermont has VHIP, which you probably know about. So if you create an ADU, you can get a forgivable loan up to $50,000. And there are certain criteria and you have to agree to rent the unit below certain rent limit.
So
For 5 years. So it's tricky, it's complicated, but
That would basically pay for your septic problem.
yeah. That's
all it's gonna
like,
do. Yes.
I wonder if we want to consider adding rentals to the list. It's an area that Jericho is really lacking in and really needs.
As an incentive.
Yeah.
as a result that an outcome that we're trying to incentivize. Like,
Correct.
what would be an appropriate incentive to offer if someone included rentals or?
It's already included in 10.12.12. What is that? Apartments. But maybe, not to say that it can't be pulled out or incentivized in a different way.
This isn't affordable.
Yeah.
Well, the challenge for a developer with building a rental unit is somebody has to own it and manage it. Whereas if they build a house and sell it, they're done.
Yeah, look, I have a good friend that was building buildings all over Burlington, and they're 18-unit buildings, they're all rentals, and he owns them forever. That's his business.
Yeah, there are plenty of people, but a lot of people would be like, I just don't want to be bothered with it.
Right.
No, but we just need one of those guys to come
Yes.
here.
Right.
Can't give our-
That would double our rentals.
That's right.
Or those cottages in upstate New York.
Yeah.
Those were all rentals.
Right.
Every single one was a rental, and the guy just like you're saying, that was his model.
That's his
So it kind
business.
of goes back to our discussion at the beginning of the meeting where zoning can only do so much.
Right.
That we need other partners to achieve the vision.
Right. Like I should call them and say like, why are you in Burlington? And our lights just went out.
Yeah.
What would it take for you to come
If
to
you could do a
Jericho?
density bonus and build an 18-unit apartment
Right.
in the commercial district, you wouldn't need any open space. You could do PUDs.
Right. But I'm pretty
Yes,
sure what I would say is water, wastewater, road, sidewalks, parking garage. Potentially, or, you know, the ability to drill into the ground for a parking garage. That's probably what he would say, but it would be good to get it.
What would stop us from saying you can have that density and that bonus in one of the other parts of town? Where there is ample land for outside parking and there's enough suitable soil for septic that you could have a 10, 12 unit rental space. Why does it
It's
have
just-
to be in the center of town?
Well, in his particular case, what I was thinking about for my friend, I would think he doesn't want to build a septic system. He just wants an allocation from the city to tap in so that his building can use the capacity and the water system that's there and the streets. You know, he's not a streets builder, he's not a septic builder, he's an apartment builder, building builder. And a property manager, you know, tenants and rents and all that, renovations. Like he's all in on running the building. I think his business doesn't include all the other stuff.
Yeah, then that's kind of what.
So the Jericho Development Committee should probably reach out and say, we'll build a damn thing for you. You rent it.
Or we'll put in the infrastructure for it. You built the building and rent it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what CHIP is designed to do.
Okay, seems like the energy level is declining. So have we given you the kind of smart conversation that you were looking for, Chris, that you can mine and for some good takeaways?
Well, that's fine. I was just thinking, I mean, this has been a really good conversation, and I want to say, well, I really like the idea of, and I think we all like the idea of trying to tailor benefits and purposes and incentives a little more. I was trying to get a little more direction on that. I know the direction that I want to go, which is focusing on the low density residential, village, and commercial. I think SJ wanted to think about that a little more. Are other people more comfortable with that, or do you want to hold off on making a commitment on that?
I guess I don't know what you mean.
What are we committing to here?
I don't understand.
Got it. Well, in terms of like guidelines that up front, in terms of this is what we want to do, that I include at the beginning of every presentation, and we're sort of adding to that at each meeting. Where do we want to focus our incentives, and what are the kinds of incentives that we want to focus? I think we've got a really good list of incentives that we want to focus tonight that I can pull from the discussion. I'm trying to narrow, like, where do we want to focus those incentives?
Well, yeah, okay. I don't want to narrow those focuses to to those incentives to specific districts until I know what the incentives are. Like if we
Understood.
come up with some really great pocket neighborhood, something or other, small thing that we could absolutely utilize in rural ag, I hate to close the door on that before we.
I think we're mixing up terminology between an outcome and an incentive. So to me, pocket neighborhood, small clustered is an outcome.
Yeah.
And when I hear Chris talking about an incentive, he's thinking a density bonus. So currently we offer 50% density bonus if you do these things and 100% if you do these things. And he's asking us, so sort of in response to what you were saying earlier, like, do we want to target it? Maybe the density bonus in the low density residential district and the commercial district should be 200%, but not necessarily 200% in rural ag. So that kind of, if you're talking about a density bonus incentive, is that something that should maybe be more in these areas and stay the same in these other areas? But so my question about that is kind of like your question, but different, which is, are there other incentives that we can bring to the party? Is density bonus and lot size the only things we can think of? We've come up with other ideas of, like, we can incentivize excess capacity. We could incentivize cottage neighborhoods or pocket neighborhoods. We have a lot of ideas of what we can encourage. But do we have anything else that we can do other than density bonus and lot
That's why I
size?
want to see the harvest article, I guess.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, so there's density. I also, I hate to say it at 8:40, but I'm gonna say it anyway, because that's what I do. I'm also interested in how this conversation gets impacted or not by separating density from lot area, whatever it was that our last big meeting was about. And how does that impact some of this or not? But I do think yes, what other than density?
Well, the town could help pay for Act 250 permitting. The town could, I mean,
Mhm.
you know, that'd be a pretty big incentive. I think.
Impact fees, that's on the list.
And that's not something
But
that we,
and those are things that the select board is looking at.
yeah, what are,
Are there other things, Chris, that you're aware of that, like, other towns and cities have used as an incentive to get a developer to produce a public benefit that they want? Other than building infrastructure, which is not a zoning thing, density bonus, lot size. What else can zoning do?
Yeah, I really don't know of anything. To me, what we really need to get this type of stuff is infrastructure, is wastewater. Like, that's the big focus.
I second that completely.
that's great, but we're the planning commission. So let's.
Let's do everything that zoning can do. Let's make sure we
Mhm.
are doing everything in our power with zoning. That's our mission.
So maybe that's something that we can bring back for next meeting.
Additional incentives?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have only seen density as really something that drives an incentive. I mean, there are, I mean, reduction in fees, yes. But it's really density is the big thing.
Well, we could increase the density dramatically and we could figure out a way to solve the Act 250 problem.
You get a Nobel Prize if you can do that one.
Well, I mean, I'm not trying to solve it on a statewide level. I'm trying to solve it at Jericho level. And I think it's, you know, that seems relatively simple. It's figuring out some way to have legal advice or cash. So that somebody walks in and says, I'm not doing this because of Act 250. You say that's not true.
I want to go back through the discussion from tonight and come to the notes and collect my thoughts more before coming back with something more specific.
Okay.
Shall I go to the next slide?
You can jump ahead 2 slides.
Both slides. All right, we have no public.
Okay, so then one more slide.
Okay, I just have 2 quick updates. One, the municipal planning grant for the wastewater development scenarios got submitted last week. The deadline was yesterday, so we will hear by the end of December whether or not we get that grant. So that's good news. And then Homes for All Jericho, which I think I've mentioned before. SJ and I met with a group of students from UVM and gave them the down low on housing in Jericho. SJ, do you want to say anything about that? I thought it was a good meeting with them. They're bright-eyed UVM students that want to do good. So,
We talked at them and bickered in front of them and it was fine.
oh, we didn't bicker.
Yes, we did. That's bigger. Bigger.
I mean, they asked us questions and we talked, so it wasn't a whole lot of them. I don't know. I didn't take a lot from it other than they had great questions and they were very attentive and took it seriously.
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
thinking-
I don't know. I don't know what we're really going to get out of it, but I'm glad we're doing it and we'll get something and hopefully it'll be helpful.
I was thinking about this project though, not our project, but the state project, when you were like, Montpelier, they're really investing in trying to produce this kind of housing, small multifamily. And I was like, yeah, that's what this whole project is. They're trying to train developers, trying to take costs out by like here, if you use, here's the whole architectural drawing of a quad.
Right.
So I do think that there are other things in there that will help.
Yeah, and we have to be as open and welcoming a place for those things to take purchase as we can be.
Okay, anything else?
Nope.
Chris?
That's it.
Okay.
That's it. Yep.
How about any liaison updates from anyone?
Housing committee has a meeting next week, just to touch base, nothing big on the agenda other than continuing the work that we've been doing. I went to the housing convening, the CCRPC's housing convening, that Susan and Chris were at. The focus of that was CHIP, the Community Housing Infrastructure Program. And I don't know if you all have prepared something to say about it. I won't steal your thunder. But basically the idea behind that is for projects, both big and small. And I was really appreciative that they walked through a small example. And by small, I mean like 4 units small. So development on the scale that Jericho would be interested in doing. So access to long-term financing that a municipality or a developer can engage in without having to raise local property taxes. So the idea is to invest in infrastructure. You have to show that that infrastructure is critical to building new housing. And basically you get a loan, essentially, to invest that infrastructure, to build it. And then the idea is that you pay for that afterwards with the taxes, the state and municipal taxes that would be collected from that new housing that comes as a result of that infrastructure investment. Which is great. It seems like they're really pretty loosey-goosey on what eligible infrastructure improvements might be. And the criteria seem pretty loosey-goosey. I think they're really trying to throw money at people to do this. One of the things that stood out to me just from an affordable housing perspective is part of the incentive structure to try to incentivize affordable housing is you get to retain a higher percentage of the state taxes if I think it was 15%, well, it depends on the level. 15% of the houses are affordable. I think you get to keep 85% versus 75% or something like that. But the incentive is you get to keep more money from state taxes if some number of houses are affordable. And that's also true for moderately affordable. And the thing that was interesting to me there is, and I think it speaks to something that we talked about a little bit tonight, which was their definition of affordable was for owner occupied, anything less than 120% AMI. So that affordable is not eligible for subsidy, for example. Like this is actually, when you look at HUD or VHFA, in between 80% and 120% is what is classically referred to as middle income. So the fact that that's their upper mark for affordable is interesting. And then moderately affordable also is incentivized, allowing you to keep more taxes, and moderately affordable, the cap there is 150% AMI. And they specifically call out those numbers for owner occupied. So rental affordable is still the less than 80% AMI. So I think that's just interesting, and I think it speaks to the reality of the market and how much more houses and living costs compared to median income. And so those numbers are just make so much more sense, and are much more the kinds of numbers that we're looking at in Jericho in particular. One thing that one of the speakers really spent a lot of time talking about, and I was so happy to hear, was CHIP, this program really requiring municipalities who want to take advantage of it to see themselves in a different role, to see themselves as more active and participants, rather than just, kind of passive bystanders who make sure that the roads get plowed, which is important too. And there was some kind of glimmer of hope that maybe the CCRPC or our regional developing, I can't remember what our regional developing corp. It's like the Greater
GBIC,
Yeah,
Greater Burlington Industrial Corp.
That's right. That hopefully they may take on a little bit of a role in kind of helping municipalities through this process. Maybe not to the extent of project managing them, but a real kind of advisory role in providing templates and guidelines. But they also stress that this is a program that's pretty straightforward and should be really easy for people to take advantage of.
Well, yeah, I think what they said was it's simpler than TIF,
Right.
but not simple.
Right.
So, yes, but simpler.
And so, yes, so the fact that the CCRPC and potentially our regional development corp may take a role in providing some support, I think it will be welcome and important. And then the last thing was there was a rep there from South Burlington who is interested in doing some work around HOAs in Montpelier. So I connected with her to find out a little bit more about what she's interested in and what she's talking about. One of the things that she mentioned in passing was an HOA resource center. What that is, what she imagines that to be, I don't know. In my mind, it might be like, in order to amend your HOA bylaws, you'd have to go through a lawyer and legally do that. And so a resource center that can help you do that or provide you with template language or something would be really helpful. So I'm thinking maybe that's what she means, but I don't know. So it's just, we've heard it before, but it's nice to know that people in Montpelier recognize the impediment that HOAs can be in some of this work, and that they're thinking about it. And she was interested to kind of follow up and talk with us. So, did you guys have anything else from?
Well, it made me fantasize about Jericho's collective appetite for development, because you could imagine using CHIP all over town.
Yeah.
Going crazy with it.
Right.
It would be incredibly powerful. Just, it's an incredible opportunity, but I don't know what the collective appetite would be for development, because it's a fundamentally different way of operating the town than Jericho has done. So,
Well, and I was thinking about it in terms of like bringing water to the circle. But it needs to be tied to new housing. And so, like, I have lots of ideas about projects around town that would have new housing, but the situation
but you
in
could,
Jericho Circle, this one.
Jericho Center,
Center, sorry.
but you could, well, there's.
But that
there's
spot that you
still
keep
that
talking
spot
about,
On Plains Road is right for
Oh my
a
gosh,
lot,
100%.
a great density.
It's true.
project.
If we
So
could,
that-
if we could
do
bring
that,
water
yes.
up to there and connect it
Yes.
through and build that, yeah, that's true. Anyway. It was really useful. It was nice to hear what other housing committees and planning commissions are doing, and I think we're ahead of the curve. I think we have been for the last couple of years.
Yeah, I felt ahead of the curve. What I thought was interesting about the housing convening was the hearing from White and Burke.
Yeah.
And then, so continuing on, so the wastewater committee, there, we have like a financing subgroup, and Chip will be potentially really instrumental in financing any sort of future infrastructure, which could potentially be wastewater. So, the wastewater committee is possibly gonna have like a follow-up conversation with White and Burke. And then also recommend to the select board that they have some sort of presentation on CHIP from VLCT or White and Burke or somebody like that.
I was just
So
gonna ask that, I think collectively all heard about this now, but has the select board heard? about
they
it?
haven't, and so we talked about what would be the most like efficient and effective way to bring it to their attention, educate them about it, and then have them understand like how they might proceed and what the timing of that would be, given the work on the budget and stuff.
Seems
So,
like White Bird would be potentially ideal for that
yeah, they would be awesome.
job, because they could answer the question about the link between the town and the developer.
Right.
Yeah.
In a with real world example.
And White and Burke, we first learned about from Dominic St. Cloud in St. Albert. He was like they were his right hand
Yeah,
partner for years, right? While he learned.
right. And they presented at the financing meeting that Heidi and I went to last year, so a lot of this stuff came up, this was like this time last year, so yes, they're good.
They would be a good resource, and just figuring out like when and how best way to tap into them. Okay, any other add, so that just on the wastewater committee, I would say that was learning about CHIP, and we have our next meeting in a week.
No.
Or next,
Meeting.
we usually
Your-
meet,
your subcommittee, you mean?
we usually meet this week, but the meetings changed to next week because Chris is traveling.
Oh, well, somebody should tell the website
Oh,
person these
yeah,
things
the
so that they can change the website.
Yes. Okay.
You're meeting now.
I know, okay,
Maybe tell them it's like person that.
I'll remember to.
I'm not sure how much this may affect that, but I'm out next week and the week after.
That's for the wastewater task force.
Okay. I'm still out this week, next week and the week after and the week after that, so
Oh, so you're gone.
So you
for-
will not be here on the 18th?
I will
Yeah,
not be here on the 18th.
Okay.
Okay. Any other updates? Okay. So, any other business? Okay, so November 18th, Eric won't be here. Is there anybody else who can't be here?
We'll be here remotely.
Zoom. Wendy will be Zoom, okay. And what is our topic for the 18th, Chris? Shaheen? Do you remember?
Yeah, oh, well, I just had that pulled
Are we
up.
we're kind of summarizing are we at the end? I think we're toward the end of the list.
Yeah, hang on, I'm pulling it up. Scenario testing. I'm not sure if we're going to be there yet, but I'll have to think about how we might be able to cover that.
Okay.
Apply
then
reforms to
prob-
example sites, what works, what still blocks good development was the focus.
So some of our working groups on density and on the zoning district descriptions will meet between now and then too, right?
Right, and the forest and the conservation,
And our,
the NRO group, yep.
okay, so that might be a bulk of it, that might be a big part of the meeting.
Yep.
Okay. I will make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
I can do that. And Chris seconds, all those in favor of adjourn, please say yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
9 o'clock on the
Yep.
dot.
Thank
Mhm.
you. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Erin. Good night.
See you all.